Grafter is a direct result of finding it hard selling and a deep belief that there is not a vehicle, methodology, or service out there for entrepreneurs that helps them maximize the value of their business prior to an exit. There's so many flavors for valuing businesses. A business is only ever worth what someone's prepared to pay for it. 50% of the businesses we work with are planning to exit in 3 to 5 years, but there's a lot of work that needs to happen in these businesses to get them ready for an exit. We help create those playbooks, create that IP, get it documented and get it kind of understood, the secret sauce, the stuff that you just do in your sleep. A lot of that is huge value add. We haven't had a client go through the methodology that hasn't achieved an ROI within a 12-week period. You're creating so much value.
Rachel Murphy, welcome to the Healthtech Podcast. How are you doing?
Hey, James. Yeah, doing good, mate. Really good, thank you.
Yeah, so Rachel, delighted to have you on. I think this is going to be a good one because we cover a lot of health tech businesses on the Healthtech Podcast. We get a lot of entrepreneurs coming through, and I think a lot of people being sold the dream of exit and, well, ideally building for an exit. They want the growth, they want the impact, but obviously exiting a business, and that can look like a lot of things. That's failure is an exit, famously, as the phrase goes. So there's many ways to exit a business. But you obviously being an expert in this, having done it a few times and now helping other people to do it as well. So delighted to have you on. And you were just saying to me that 50% of the companies that you work with are in healthcare. So we've got lots to learn from you here about growth of companies, about driving revenue, getting to a point of even exit being an option, and then obviously going through and getting an exit being the goal for a lot of people. I think we can sort of drill down into that and see what the innards of that stuff are. But welcome, first of all. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, mate. I'm struggling slightly. I've got the infamous COVID,
The old
which
COVID.
wasn't quite the gift I was aiming for when I landed in Spain. We're doing a little test, so we're out here for 12 weeks to kind of see what this, working remotely lark is like. And
Mm,
I'd said to my other half, building, for the third time. Listen, if I do build another company, then I'm adamant that I want to go and kind of live
do
in a
it your
warmer
way.
climate for a period. Yeah,
Mm.
and so a couple of years in, I thought, well, I better get my finger out actually and get out there and see what it's all about. Delighted to see that it is piss down in the UK since I left, actually, mate. So yeah, it's been a good start, I'd say, apart from the COVID bit.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, nice. It does look far too warm where you are to be having COVID, but I'm sure it'll clear up quickly. So Rachel, listen, it'd be good to chat about your journey up until this point then, and sort of I guess why healthcare. Have you always built in healthcare? What were the first two businesses?
Yeah, first two were in healthcare. So well, very first business was social care, but of course healthcare,
Mm,
and that was a consultancy, and going back many years. So I was, what was I, early 20s, and
mm,
I was implementing the first web-based social care system in the UK,
mm,
and I, I had a strong view that whilst the software was good, it was going to be very tricky to get social care departments, local authorities to implement this software without a kind of team of like professional services people.
mm,
Um, who would be able to help. Now, the ideal setup was that they would be social workers that were seconded over, and I pitched the owner of the company, and I said, listen, are you building out a PS capability? And he said, no, the software's shit up. We are selling the software. They're going to use it. Jobs are good. And I said, oh, right. I said, well, if you're okay with it, I'm going to rock up wherever you sell the software. I'm going to build a company and we're going to do the implementation. And I think he thought, You're about 25, love. You're obviously very lively, much livelier than I am at 47. And so I don't think he thought it was much of a threat. And we wrote a mil of revenue in the first 12 months, and we
Oof.
ended up implementing the software for about 42 local authorities,
Wow.
and then kind of went on and we built out e-learning software. We built a training academy for people that were implementing the software. So yeah, it was good crack. But that's going back like 20 years now. And then second business was an agency. So Different was the second company, and Different was basically user research all the way through to implementing
Mm,
software. And it was that kind of user research, UX design, dev, build, and then put it live. So we built things like the COVID home testing service for the UK, NHS jobs, so the
oh
national
wow.
system for all recruitment into the NHS. But we did some huge systems for both government and healthcare, and then sold that one in 2020.
Wow. What makes you go again after the first one? Tech entrepreneur, built a tech business. Did you sell that first one?
So first one, I sold the assets of the first one. So
Okay.
the backdrop to that is my stepdaughter Charlotte got sick with meningitis,
Oh wow.
meningococcal septicemia.
Oof.
Couple of years into me building that one, and that kicked off probably a 12-month period, 6 months for Charlotte in ICU, and then a further six in hospital. And Charlotte's a triple amputee as
Whoa.
a result, and for obvious reasons, taking time out of the business and being there with family was top
Mm,
priority. But of course, we were in a very early stage. So what happened there was, I prioritized the right thing, but it meant we ended up selling the assets
mm,
rather than it being a kind of going concern. Yeah, it's timing
mm,
Charlotte was the top priority, as she
mm,
should have been.
mm. The second business and building that. Well, actually, let's talk about the environment of those first two businesses, because there was somewhat of I guess, a tech boom. Tech was hot. There was so many tech businesses being built, and it seems trickier now. What was it about that? Was there an element of timing at that time for those types of businesses in comparison to now? Like, what do you think are the differences between then and now?
Well, I think for the second one, for different, it wasn't a wash with agencies that were doing user research through to running live services. So
Mm,
it was a much earlier stage. Um, and I think there was space in the market to really double down on having domain expertise in healthcare. And I think, yeah, there's a hell of a lot more now. But also, I thought it was a tricky time at that point dealing with the NHS. It's nowhere near as hard as it is right now, and so
wow.
it's all learning, isn't it? Because if we play that tape forward, I sold that business during COVID, and so you sell a healthcare consultancy during a global pandemic, you're gonna have a good result if you know
Mm,
what you're up to.
mm,
And then, as we know, valuations went through the roof for healthcare businesses, and that now they've plummeted, and they've probably dropped lower than the market value, I would
mm,
say. But they were so bloody inflated back end of 2020, 2021 that it becomes the new norm really quickly. So I think the timing for different was key. I think selling the business during a pandemic was, I could talk up a storm and say it was perfectly timed and executed.
mm,
The one thing we did do, we had a sell pack ready 18 months before.
Wow.
We
Okay.
were selling the business, and that very much leads into why I built the Grafter, if I'm honest. But by having that ready, it meant, when we were up for conversations or people knocked on the door, we could articulate, have a data room, show them what was going on in a way that most small businesses doing, we were doing 10 mil, but most businesses couldn't have, couldn't articulate.
Yes, understood. So, just filling in the rest of the story then for now, and then we'll go back and talk about more of those topics. But the grafter, tell me, you mentioned it just then. Tell me what the grafter is and why you started that.
So the grafter is a direct result of finding it hard selling the last business and a deep belief that there is not um, a vehicle, methodology, or service out there for entrepreneurs that helps them maximize the value of their business prior to an exit.
Mm,
And that was what prompted me to design the methodology and build that out and get it launched. And that happened a couple of years ago. And the rationale really is I'd found it hard going through that process, even though I had a brilliant lawyer sitting alongside. And I just don't believe that there is that service out there. And so wanted to build it. And that's what we've done over the last 24 months.
yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because we talk about exit, and it can sound a little bit mercenary talking about exit because it's especially in healthcare where we're afraid of profit and we don't want to talk about money, which I think is not a good thing for actually creating value within a system because money really is just a proxy for value. It's just how we measure it and how it moves to help create it in various places. But yeah, what we're really talking about is maximizing value. So what you're helping to do is maximize value. You're helping to increase revenue, which then increases the impact of that business. You're helping to streamline processes and reduce costs. All of this just increases the value of a company, which is reflected in an exit value. So that's the interesting thing. You're actually a value creation business. You're helping businesses become better businesses, which I think is really interesting. But also to address the mercenary point, like I think there is also something about if we building business is hard and really hard, especially when you're borrowing capital or you're raising equity funding or debt or whatever, however you're raising that money, you're borrowing all these things from other people. Like you're loaded with so much responsibility and you're pushed on doubling revenues every year and all this stuff. It's horrendously stressful what you need to sacrifice and risk that on some level, I'm sort of thinking as I'm talking here, but on some level, like streamlining that exit process and showing people what that value could be and you're creating incentive, aren't you? Like you're helping streamline the system and create more businesses in a way if people know that they're going to get financially rewarded for all this sacrifice that they're going through. And of course, not everyone does, but at least that aspiration, ambition is there if we can streamline the exit process.
I totally agree. And also, I think you've probably given me a better strap line than we've rustled up in the last 24 months.
I'm in comms, Rachel, to be fair.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I should have called you. I should have called you a while ago, mate. But I think that you're absolutely right about maximising value. But also, the point that you've made there is so key for the UK market. Um, when I launched initially, I called it eight-figure exit, and it was so hard for entrepreneurs in the UK to get their head around. If we were
mm,
launching to the US market, it would have been, why is it not nine-figure? Do you know what I mean? And in the end, we pivoted to grow, raise, exit, and that's the name of the methodology.
mm,
Because just having it tied to exit it's not. We're very British.
mm,
It's not palatable talking about money.
mm,
It's not palatable talking about exit. And what we also found was we ended up doing so much work around driving the revenue and creating value for businesses that it was a no-brainer for
mm,
us that those pieces of consultancy folded into the methodology and allowed us to drive that. And I think it's really important to say what we do as a business is, we land and we do a diagnostic with the founder, with the management team, and we do that to put a stake in the ground and understand exactly where the business is. And we get a maturity assessment for each part of the business.
Mm.
This is not about saying, you're a level 3 maturity, what the hell's going on. It's about saying this is where we are, and then creating a baseline for a plan going forward, be that grow, raise, or exit. But by doing that diagnostic up front, we truly understand where some of the challenges and the opportunities are. Um, but in way of exit, yeah, moving straight to exit's a dirty word in the
Mm.
UK. An exit can be management buyout, an employee-owned trust. It can be sell to the highest bidder. It could be a partial exit. There's so many flavors and
Mm.
variety. That's part of the educating that we need to do.
Mm. Could you just run through a few of those actually? Just because obviously this is the world you're in all the time, and I think even for someone like me who owns a bootstrapped business that is employing 15, 20 people, like this is these types of things. I don't feel I'm educated enough on them, let alone everyone listening. So like it'd be quite useful
Yeah,
to just
yeah.
run through a couple of those.
So let me go through some of these. So the most well known would be you are selling your business to a competitor, and therefore there is a valuation component of the business, and then there is agreeing the terms around. How you're going to sell the business for what number over what period of time, um, what any earnout provisions look like. And an earnout meaning, you're not free to go and work elsewhere. You need to go over as part of the transaction. So you've got a sale to a competitor, normally based on an EBITDA or a multiple of the revenue of the business. So there's so many flavors for valuing businesses, but the one thing I would say is a business is only ever worth what someone's prepared to pay for it. So
Mm.
you can dream up the valuations all you like. In the analogy I often use is it's a bit like getting Foxtons round to value your property. You know it's going to be inflated, and it isn't selling for that.
Mm.
And you can liken that to a wealth of different business brokers. For me, I would rather we were utterly realistic about what the
Yeah.
valuation of the business is. So you've got a sale to competitors, you've got a sale to a strategic. So a strategic is likely to be somebody who isn't necessarily in your sector or industry, but wants the knowledge, the skill, the IP, the playbook that you've got to add on to their business, and they will therefore pay a premium for that.
Mm.
And then you've got a partial exit. So they are taking some equity in the business and they are ploughing some money in. A great example, we sold Carruthers and Jackson very early into building the Grafter. And Caroline Carruthers was my boss many years ago, and now she's an exiteer. So it's gone full circle. But Carruthers and Jackson was a partial exit. What I mean by that is they took some of the equity in the business. She took some cash off the table on A Day, so the day the deal was done, and they then ploughed money into the business. She's doing the job that she absolutely loves, but she's got a much bigger business behind her
Mm.
to support with a lot of the back office and the sales and marketing functions. So the skills that she had and the IP she had, opens doors for them. So, and then you've got a management buyout. So, within a business, you have a management team, and they may decide, actually, we want to buy the business, and so they pull together resources, make an offer, and then you've got an employee-owned trust, which is one of the few. It's one of the few processes that the current Labour government haven't changed the tax treatment around. So, an employee owned trust is a very tax efficient way for a founder to sell their business to a trust. You need to establish a
Mm,
trust, and that trust is normally made up of employees of the business. But what it enables is if the business is kind of throwing off cash, then you almost do like an annuity deal. So you get paid out over a 3, 5, 7, 10 year period. But the trust effectively owns the business. So what it means is that, employees who wouldn't naturally become entrepreneurs, move through that cycle and ultimately will own equity in a business. So there's tons of different flavors, but the bit that we do, we have to understand what the founder and founding team want from a personal perspective. Because if we don't understand that, we'd run the risk of potentially helping them sell to the highest bidder and then being deeply unhappy working for a listed company or a private equity firm. And so much of the time that we spend as exiteers at the Grafter is understanding from a personal perspective, the why and what they want the future to look like. And then it's like pieces of the jigsaw that we build a number of artifacts. And I think it's probably important to explain what they are. Once we've done that kind of diagnostic of the business, and if we agree with the founder they want to sell, it doesn't happen in 5 minutes.
mm.
To your earlier point, 50% of the businesses we work with are planning to exit in 3 to 5 years. But there's a lot of work that needs to happen in these businesses to get them ready for an exit. And there's huge value in kind of doing that properly. So we would sit alongside, we would build a data room. So we'd build a repository of the key documents that underpin the journey that you've been on. Things like, your published accounts, your
Mm,
P&L,
mm,
what the strategy is, what your key contracts are, who the key people are in the organisation. So there's a raft of key documents that make up that data room. And then we build a cell pack. And a cell pack can be called information memorandum, confidential information memorandum, loads of different flavours. But what it does is it tells the story, where you've come
mm.
from, the successes you've had, and then it starts to lay out the opportunity for a potential buyer. And if we go back to what I've just explained, there's lots of flavours of potential buyers. So, part of I guess the art and the skill and the creativity that exiteers bring to the process is once we understand what the founders want, we want to create that narrative in a certain way. And it's a very, very powerful process. For me, when I sold the last business, genuinely, I understood that business better than I'd understood it when I've been running it for the 5 years
Yeah.
previous. And that is crazy. But you're looking at it through a different lens.
Well, this is the thing that this is actually what I was going to say, or a question that I was going to ask is, does preparing for an exit make you a better business? And it's a question that relates to this idea that what we're actually saying in preparing for an exit is what we're doing is we're sharpening up the business, making all the value very visible. And therefore you're actually taking a much greater look at some of these things. And I'll give you a practical example for the listeners here. So let's say at SomX, we were thinking about this. We've got these things that are sort of partly visible, not really that visible, but drive a lot of what we do in terms of our attention, our influence on our distribution. So yes, our core business at SomX is we're a communications agency. So we have the simplest business model in the world on that side of the business, which is we spend less than we earn each month. And what we do is communications and marketing activity for retainers. And we pay staff slightly less than what clients pay us. It's an incredibly simple business model. So on the face of it, you could value the business at whatever multiple you get for a communications agency, and that could be that. However, we also do Healthtech Pigeon, 7,500 subscribers in Healthtech, and we have a lot of influence on the narrative of what people are reading and that kind of thing. We've got this podcast, we've got the Healthtech Pigeon podcast, we've got Next Gen, which is the next generation network for young leaders in health tech and biotech, and that's something that we've got now, which acts as a talent pipeline to what we do, because those people are generally under 30 and see themselves as future leaders and are driving stuff of their own. So like, we have all these things that are sort of ancillary to what we do and adjacent to what we do, that I think my hypothesis is that if we were looking at an exit, actually a person that came in and I keep using the word exit, but really we're talking about, if I'm maximizing the value of what my healthcare business is here, it's actually taking a greater look at some of these things and going, well, there's value locked in here. There's impact locked in here. Why aren't you generating more sponsorship revenue? Because you can use that sponsorship revenue to drive the growth of it. It can influence more people. It can do more things. And I think that's my hypothesis here with like, I'm sort of at a point now where, okay, we can talk about exit. We should start thinking about an exit and build to exit. But I don't think for me at the moment, it doesn't feel like that's the outcome that I necessarily want to do anytime soon. It's more for me going through this methodology that you've just mentioned, just to make my business better so I can have more impact in the health tech space.
Well, and I think, you've kind of hit the nail on the head there, in way of the approach. So if I was looking at your business, I would be saying, let's get that IP documented. And I mean, create the playbooks, the how you are operating, because there is value all over the place there. So we'd want to paint a picture of that, because the chances are, your potential acquirer in the future may well not be another communications business. It may well be somebody who thinks, wow, there is incredible value market access here across, health tech and biotech, and we want a piece of that. So you're absolutely right. By going through the process of that methodology, we help founders and their teams to realize that and to create those playbooks, create that IP, get it documented and get it kind of understood, the secret sauce, the stuff that you just do in your sleep, because a lot of that is huge value add. If I think about the sale of my last business, part of our multiple was attributed because the brand that we generated. Now, that is deeply unusual for the sale of an SME, but it was so synonymous with delivery from a healthcare perspective into the NHS that it was, it directly contributed to part of the valuation. And it's with a very robust playbook around how we approached a discovery, an alpha and a beta, delivering services into government and healthcare. And again, all of those things play a really key part. But I think, and rightly, why would founders know that? Because here's the news. They are incredible domain experts in their area. This is a completely different domain. And so, pulling in and getting some help around readiness, for me, that's why our kind of ROI is so powerful. We haven't had a client go through the methodology that hasn't achieved an ROI within a 12-week period because, you're creating so much value.
I think that's it. I think that is it. I think the thought process for the founders listening of like building for exit, I think it's not a money conversation for me. The thought process and a building for exit is actually a process of looking for where the value is, because in preparing for exit, you're looking at your business academically, forensically, and going, okay, for potential buyers, there's loads of value here. Therefore, there is loads of value here. And actually, we should be doing more here. And here's a place to put the accelerator on, because actually we can create more value into it. So that for me is what it feels like. Here's something that I'm interested in.
If you see the name change on our service later today, you'll know that I have absolutely ripped off that suggestion.
Just give me a discount when I come for your services, right?
And no, you can't lay claim to it. But yeah, you can get a discount off the back of that.
I'll hold you to that. Here's something that I think we can chat about, because you're one of your wonderful qualities is you're not afraid to speak your mind and be very honest and open. And so I'm interested in what you think about what the UK is like for entrepreneurship, because I know this is quite broad. This goes beyond healthcare, but I'm seeing and hearing a lot of discourse at the minute politically. Obviously, relatively new Labour government if you compare it to how long the Conservatives were in. Um, there's change. There's change to taxes. There's change to loads of stuff. Not that I want to make this a really dull conversation about loads of different taxes. However, there's broad brushstrokes here that we can talk about in terms of, I mentioned at the beginning, if we create the incentive right for starting a business, people are more likely to take the risk. And I'm just interested in what you think about where that is. Like, is there enough incentive for the right level of entrepreneurship? Do you think more incentive could be created with a different system? Do you think we're doing well or could be doing better?
On the basis that you have said I am outspoken, I won't hold back on my view.
Please don't. No, I'm interested in your opinion. I'll challenge it
I
where I can, but yeah.
yeah, of course. I think that the Labour government are an absolute shambles,
Okay.
and I think that uh, I just think the lack of entrepreneurial thinking worries me greatly. The UK was coming from a low base anyway under a Tory government, so I want to make that point. In way of things like, you know, uh, when you business relief. So when you're selling a business,
Yeah.
there was a reduction around the the percentage of tax break, but that continues to get worse. And I think we only need to have a look at social media to see just how many entrepreneurs are voting with their feet and exiting stage left, and including entrepreneurial royalty. I've got a few absolute heroes of mine who are entrepreneurs who are on the move outside of the UK at the minute, and that really terrifies me because I just think that we are going to have a real drain of innovation and entrepreneurial thinking. And I think it comes from a couple of different places. Um, if I was in the Labour government, I would be creating incentives to start businesses. I don't know what the stats are, but I would hazard a guess that 50% of the UK is employed by SMEs. And I mean, we need to validate that. But the when you hike up national insurance, you're de-incentivizing people. I know for me it has, building that grafter, there's one permanent person in the grafter, you're talking to her, and everybody else is an interim or fractional.
Mm.
Um, and that will continue to be the model. Now, that model would be different if the NI piece was different, and I just think the incentives for bootstrap founders. I'm a bootstrap third time round. I get the SEIS and the EIS, the ability to protect if people are investing in. But where the hell are the incentives for the bootstrappers? And that's the bit that really, really frustrates me. And I just think that there's a reason I'm filming this from Spain. I'm doing a recce for a 12-week period to see what life would be like in a different location, and it really pisses me off because it's really easy in the UK to set up a business. I think the digitisation of government services is exceptional. So I think that has been good for a number of years. But I think if you go below that, setting up a limited company, and actually what are the incentives, and how do we maximise that kind of innovation? And to your point, it is about risk. You're asking entrepreneurs to risk. It might not work. More times than not, it doesn't bloody work.
Mm.
You're running 5 jobs, you're working 10-hour days, 7 days a week, and there's no incentives. It's fucking crazy.
Mm.
we might need to edit around that.
I'll just put the explicit label on. It's good to hear the passion. I think you've so interestingly. I don't spend loads of time on this, but like you've mentioned two different levels there, which is quite interesting. The starting out people and the entrepreneurial royalty, and you've said like equally you're struggling to see where we're doing well on both of those extremes. What would you what would you do differently? I think is a like I'm not asking for specific policies here, but like broadly, what's the problem and what would you do differently in those two levels?
So I think the problem is a distinct lack of entrepreneurial thinking. So we need incentives to set up businesses, and that will come from a tax, from a corp tax, from a national insurance. We need those incentives. If I could wave a magic wand, I would have something like the SBA scheme that they have in the US. So this is a federal government supported way of borrowing money, 80% underwritten by the federal government, and 20% is covered by the business owner. But this means people can be starting businesses, buying businesses a hell of a lot easier. Now, that's not to say that I agree with all the politics in the US, because let's
That'd
not
be
go
a
there,
wild
mate.
thing to say.
That'd be a different podcast and a different planet. However, some of those incentives does drive that optimism and excitement that you get
Yeah,
when you chat to US entrepreneurs. And so I just think we are missing a trick in the
yeah.
UK right now around early stage, setting up, bootstrapping, and supporting. And then as things start to grow, and/or you're building value, you're thinking about the future, it's you're just getting shafted at every turn, and
Mm.
that's the bit I think that is driving people to say, where are the incentives? We're heading into winter. I know this sounds dramatic, but everything feels bloody worse when it's raining.
It does, yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's why what I think we're going to see is loads of entrepreneurs continuing to run businesses in the UK because it's easy to set up and leveraging the tax benefits elsewhere, and not actually having the UK as their primary residence. And it's like, why can they not see that this is coming? Obviously, I'm in danger of being on one of my favourite subjects here, James. So I'll calm down a little, but it just needs a look. And
Yeah.
if tax is the big driver, and I get where we are as a country, and I'm not even going to go there on some of the choice topics of the day,
Mhm.
but let's start taxing some of the very big corporates that we
Mm.
know aren't paying tax over here. Why are we tooling around, chasing the little fish? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I can remember it very well, starting SomX and bootstrapping and trying to square the numbers of like, okay, how much revenue would we need in order to then overcome all the different taxes and things to get to a point of a lifestyle where I'm only losing a little bit of my savings rather than a lot. Like that was the question. Like genuinely, like that was the question. And then like you then need this sort of belief that you're going to get to the point where you can then start into the black rather than in the red. And it's yeah, it is difficult. And that also ignores as well like the people who are just selling smoothies out the back of a really nice van that they've decorated and that kind of thing. And then things like VAT come in, and again, don't this is like a complex tax boring conversation, but like when you've got yeah, that threshold, and then things like like you just want to take money from people's cards, and the card machine will take some money, and then there'll be a fee on this, and then there's a fee on it, and then you learn that like Visa and MasterCard have got a 50% profit margin on their global business, net profit of 50%, because they've got like a ridiculous monopoly on like card machines. So like nobody can fight card fees, like stuff like that. So like that's where I got to with it, of like thinking this is really tough. It's really tough when you're small and starting out, that you kind of think, oh, I'll sell smoothies for a fiver and I'll get, I'll sell five and I've got 25 quid. No, not even close. And then God forbid you want to hire someone, all the rest of it. And I think that level of risk is so high. It's so high.
And I think that's why we have a lot of burnout and a lot of stress with startup founders
Mm.
at that early stage, because for longer than they should, they're continuing to do 3, 4, 5 jobs and try and run that bloody 6, 7 day a week. And it just, I'm not asking that it is made easy, but I think at least recognize the risk that people are taking and putting in.
Let's go back to healthcare. So, assuming we get over those hurdles in our healthcare business, be that raising capital or be that bootstrapping our way to a place of relative stability. And by the way, it's so funny actually, even me saying the word stability, because I was watching like an Alex Hormozy video, a bit of a Marmite character, but I do enjoy a lot of his business content. Like, he was saying that no matter if you're bootstrapped, no matter what level your revenue is, you will never feel comfortable, because 75% probably roughly, or 80% of that money coming in you are spending on costs. You only make money in the last couple of days of the month. So like, no matter what your revenue is, you're always chucking 80% of it out the window and keeping the 20% left. So at any point, if you lose 20% of revenue, which realistically is 1, 2, 3 clients, which is completely reasonable in the general swing of things, you're not making any money, but everyone that you're paying is. And so like, there is never a point that you ever feel that stable. So I'm sort of laughing at myself at using the word stability there. But let's assume we do get to that point of stability. And maybe you want to address that point before you answer this question. But growth in healthcare, with what you help with and what you see, what is driving that at the moment? Because it is tough. A lot of businesses are flatlining, and flatlining is actually doing well. So what advice do you have for people around growth?
So I think the market at the minute selling into the UK for healthcare is incredibly tough.
Mm.
And I'll put that out there straight away. There are really good businesses that are going pop at the minute because they have a bad quarter or 2 bad quarters and they can't
This is my
actually
point.
survive.
This is my
Yeah,
point.
and that's the bit that is really terrifying. And so a lot of the work that we do and we've done over the last couple of years is in and around. Some of this is pointing out the absolute basics, but it's very easy to forget some of this stuff when you head down trying to write a number. So who is your ICP? Who is your ideal client? And are you absolutely clear on who they are and how you get access to them?
Mm.
And then, things like partnerships with other companies, not trying to do everything yourself. Um, an area we've had a lot of success in healthcare is actually taking SaaS-based companies and pivoting to outcome-based delivery. So much more of a
Interesting.
consultant, and that has driven massive benefits. So a couple of companies that I'll refer to specifically, SARD JV from a workforce optimization, and then E18 intelligent automation. We've done a lot of work with them over the last 12, 24 months to focus on the outcome side, not just selling a SaaS license. SARD is a brilliant case study, an example. Their price point was down to 7.5 grand a year for a license, and then the first deal that we did on the outcome side was 300 grand. And so, you're talking a massive shift, but it's not just about SARD benefiting. It's also about the NHS actually getting the outcome that they needed delivered.
With
And that
reduced risk.
you've got exactly that. You've
Yeah.
got a win in every which way.
Yeah.
I think that there's an immediate thing about looking at that from a healthcare perspective. I think the other bit is reimbursement codes as a growth strategy and exploring that if you are looking outside of the UK. So I think that's another angle, and a lot of the time at the minute we are working with businesses who want to continue serving the UK market, but they don't want that as the primary. So whether it is going international or it's parallel, we're going from selling into healthcare to looking at, life sciences, looking at pharma, whatever it is starting to pivot slightly, mindful of some of the constraints and, some of the madness around grants that were allocated in the NHS that then never rocked up for people. And some of those bits that really have kind of hurt the market. But for me, thinking through some of those bits and actioning that, we've driven some incredible results. There's at least half a dozen case studies on our website where we've doubled the revenue of businesses in healthcare within a 12-month period by looking at their services a different way around.
You talked about the international piece. Don't often get the opportunity to speak to someone about this in terms of you're across various different types of businesses, the SaaS, the professional services, and you're helping them specifically with growth. And there's a number of them doing lots of different things. So I'm interested in how you look at or think or help the companies look at and think about the international expansion, because everyone obviously thinks of the US, which is in which my perception of it is that it's a big market. In professional services, we'd barely make a dent. It seems like there's a lot of time and money sink into that. It needs to be done properly. We're probably quite expensive to do. Anyway, that's my bias. Feel free to challenge it. People are also starting to talk about the Middle East. Middle East building, the leapfrogging thing that people talk about. They're leapfrogging all these like old buildings, old infrastructure, and just building from scratch. And actually, it's a good time to be getting into the Middle East and that kind of things. We're looking at very seriously, and we'll be launching in Australia because that's actually a nice market for us to go into that looks very similar to the UK did 6-7 years ago, 8 years ago, in terms of the volume of digital health. So we can get in at the ground floor, and we've got somewhat of a first mover advantage out there. So we're looking at it for that reason. But I'm interested in like what are you seeing globally when like with growth and the strength of these markets, and what businesses should play to where, and how do you help them think about that?
A lot of this we uncover as part of that diagnostic that we first start to do. And it's some of this comes down to founder, management team preference as well. But the obvious areas, so the US is getting a lot of airtime, albeit trickier with current administration to set up out there, and changes to FDA recently in way of reduction of. I did a big event in New York earlier this year, and the key topic was how hard it is now to get stuff through FDA approval because of how many staff had been binned off.
It's amazing, isn't it, with the whole deregulation narrative being like, I'm going to make it easier by deregulating stuff. And actually, here's where we are. It's much harder, much longer because of, it's interesting.
But I think that the US market, as we know, is massive, but it is not a cost-effective approach to growing a business. For me,
it's quite
I wouldn't
validating
be
you saying that, actually.
Yeah, I wouldn't be suggesting bootstrapped founders think they're landing in the US. You would definitely need a chunk, but you would also need those VCs to actually help with the market access out there.
Yeah.
So that would be my take. I know there's a number of businesses that on the ground will help with some of that, and accelerators. Middle East is another, hot market. But again, if I think about Grafter community and clients during the course of this year, I'd say maybe a third of them in healthcare have set up in UAE, in the Middle East, somewhere, to either expand their business or to explore how things would operate out there. And it hasn't been without its challenges. Getting money in and out through some of the banks is not the easiest, albeit it's a hot market. There's a lot happening, there's a lot of cash in that area, but there's cultural nuances. So for me, I'd be suggesting having a partner that really knows their way around. Um, and Vita is the business that we would work with if we were chatting with a client that wanted to expand out to Middle East. And then I guess closer to home, there are always opportunities across Europe, albeit made trickier with the Brexit situation.
Mm,
But I think that, again, back to reimbursement codes, played the right way, that has to be a growth strategy. And a lot of countries, will cover costs for a proof of concept with reimbursement codes of some brand new technology and thinking. But it's a case of of exploring and having a look to see what
mm,
options are
mm.
available. But without exception, there's not a healthcare business I'm working with at the minute who isn't exploring outside of the UK as a market.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. So are you optimistic then? When you look at things, when you look at where we are, for founders that have a business now, you might be Series A funded, you might be trying to raise a Series B, you might be just starting out, you might have a bootstrap business like us that is doing anywhere revenue 0, 10 million, I don't know. But like, are you optimistic for where we are in healthcare at the minute?
You're talking to somebody who was born optimistic, James. So the glass is always 75% full. I desperately want it to be better than it is.
Mm,
My other half would describe me as wanting to live in a Christmas movie because I like everything to be perfect. So that's how far my optimism goes. However, I think it's bloody hard work right now in the UK generally, and I think selling into the NHS is as hard as I can ever remember. But my kind of call to action to anybody who's selling in is just cast that net a little wider and have a think about parallel sectors and other locations, because the reality is, there are some great businesses having a tough time at the minute, but thinking about partnering, working with others, there is always opportunity.
mm,
But I would say sometimes it needs looking at through a different lens.
mm. I think there's something really interesting about what you do, which is when you look across your clients and you're looking at creating more value and maximizing more value and making that visible to an exit, fine. But when we look at that value creation piece, I think my hypothesis is that there's some very, very, very interesting findings at all times that are hyper recent as to what is valuable in the business of healthcare right now. So is it distribution? Is it this thing? Is it this particular tech? Or is it this combination of these three things? I think at any one time, perhaps like a lot of this, you don't even realize that you're sat on these gold mines of value, but actually democratizing the insights of what is actually valuable to buyers right now is you're kind of decoding like where value is in healthcare. I think I can get you back on this podcast every now and again to talk about that, because I think quarterly that is really interesting and important because it informs how people start businesses. And again, if I'm taking something else away from this conversation, it's that thinking about how to maximize and create as much value as possible is the same as building for exit. So actually, if we can get that information to people that listen to this podcast early doors, the people who are on the precipice of starting a business, the people who have just started a business in a certain area or whatever it is, I think if we can unlock those insights as to what is currently being paid for, because that is what the market is, that is what value is. So if people are paying for, oh, you've got distribution to 7,500 people on a newsletter specifically in health tech and biotech or a hard to reach audience, cool. Well, actually, everyone should be trying to do some bit of that because it holds so much value or whatever it is, right? So I think that's super interesting. So I'd like a commitment to help me out with that, Rachel, if you're happy coming on here talking about that stuff.
I'd absolutely love to, mate, and very happy to share kind of insights and not knowledge and information, as real time as we can.
Yeah,
But no, I'd absolutely love to. And for me, as evidence, last two businesses in healthcare and current one, 50% is healthcare. So yeah, I mean, I'm clearly no
love it.
clinician, mate. You should see me at the scene of an accident.
We're
But
overrated. We're overrated as clinicians, Rachel, I promise you.
I don't believe that for a minute. We've got plenty of clients that are clinicians, but no, I'd really welcome that opportunity.
Love it. Love it. Because I think just on the optimism piece as well, I think we hear the narrative so often that there are no exits, there are no exits, there are no exits. Yeah, there's acqui-hires, yeah, there's this. But actually, those are pretty good exits occasionally. So, like, let's not diminish them. We might not have the IPOs, but you can build a business of value and get out of it in a very positive way and go on to create more impact with your resources. So, awesome. I know you've got to shoot, but thank you so much for coming on. If people want to learn more about the Grafter, where do they go?
Grafter website is thegrafter.com, and I spend most of my life on LinkedIn, mate. So they should be able to find me there quite easily.
Amazing. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it.